Hi, and welcome to the Pink Movement podcast with your host, Christy Collier. Each episode, you'll hear from some awesome people in and around the breast cancer world, sharing their wisdom on all things health and well-being. You'll hear simple information, practical advice, and useful tips to help you stress less, move more, and feel better.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Pink Movement podcast. I'm your host, Christy Collier. Today's topic is all about prioritising your well-being, which, as you know, following a breast cancer diagnosis is just so vitally important. I'm chatting today with Amelia Harvey, who has an honours degree in psychology and is a life coach. Amelia shares with us what the term well-being actually means, why it's important for you to prioritise your well-being, and what happens when you do it and don't do it. Amelia then shares with us some fantastic suggestions about how you can go away today and start prioritising your well-being. This is a great episode, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. Amelia Harvey is a life coach, speaker, writer, and meditation teacher. It is her mission to guide women on the journey from inner critic to inner peace, and to bridge the gap between knowing what would make you feel great and actually doing it. As a life coach, Amelia combines her honours degree in psychology and wellness coaching qualification with intuitive and energetic healing techniques. Amelia will be joining us regularly on the Pink Movement podcast to share her practical, emotional, and spiritual tools to empower you to live your healthiest, happiest life. Now, welcome, Amelia, and thank you so much for joining me on the Pink Movement podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm so pleased to have you on board for this, and I'm really excited about what we're going to be talking about today and then topics for the future as well.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but today's topic that we're going to touch base on is prioritising your well-being, which we of course know is important for absolutely everybody, but obviously really vitally important for those with a breast cancer diagnosis. So we might delve in and start by just asking you about the word well-being, which is a huge buzzword at the moment, and it means lots of different things to different people. But tell me what the term means to you and what it means to you in your practice.
Yeah, I think it's one of those buzzwords that's kind of lost its meaning. You hear well-being thrown around so much now. And I think it's so important when we look at words like this or anything that we're doing when it comes to our wellness is that we're not trying to tick any external boxes. We're not trying to say, yeah, I'm going to yoga 3 times a week, or I'm eating like this or eating like that. And we're focusing on how we're feeling. And that is really what is at the core of well-being. Do you feel like you have as much energy as you'd like to have? Do you feel like you're waking up and you're in a positive frame of mind? Do you feel like you can do the things with your body that you'd like to be able to do? Or is there kind of things that aren't flowing for you? Is there things that aren't working for you? Are you connected to yourself in a way that you can ask yourself those questions and understand the answer that comes through? Can you ask yourself, like, am I feeling good enough? Am I feeling like I'm showing up how I want to in every area of my life, from my career to my family life to relationships to work to everything else? Like, that's, if we're feeling that sense of well-being, then we're able to answer all of those questions. Yes, I feel like I'm showing up as well as I possibly can.
And you mentioned there about it applying to all areas of your life. I know when talking to others about well-being, they'll talk about, just their physical well-being, where it's, just exercising. It doesn't necessarily just apply to that, does it?
No. I mean, the well-being is so holistic. I think the physical side of it is this tiny, like, part of it, because our mental health has such a massive impact on our physical health, and then our spiritual connection or our mindfulness practice or those moments where we sit with ourselves, that's a huge part of well-being as well, because if we're not doing that, even if we're doing the exercise and we're eating the great diet, if we're still a bit tormented by anxiety, or we're being really hard on ourselves mentally, or we're, maybe dipping into things like depression, or we're feeling like we're self-sabotaging and things like that, then what's the point of all the other good stuff? And the same with that moments of stillness. I think it's such a good barometer to see how you're going in your life, is that can you just sit with your thoughts? Can you be still and connect to something, whether you can believe in the higher power, a God-like thing, something like that, or whether it's just checking in with yourself and having those moments in your day where you sort of go, how am I feeling and what do I need to feel as good as I can, and be able to allow your kind of intuition to come through and guide you and have that support for you as well. So we really need all of these areas to be nurtured and looked after. And it doesn't mean we sort of have to put everything else on our life in hold and have spend hours a day on doing these kind of things, but it's tweaking what we're already doing so that we can make sure we do have that real sense of well-being.
Okay, so in terms of measuring your well-being, I'm getting a sense that the only way to really measure it is to delve internally yourself, and really, I suppose you're the only one that really knows how well you are, how your well-being is, I suppose.
Yes.
So why, obviously, all of those elements are involved in your well-being. Why is it important for someone to focus on this, to focus on improving their well-being?
If we're not looking at this, then I think what we do if we're not focusing on our own well-being is we're focused on the external stuff, and we're focused on ticking boxes that we believe are going to bring us happiness. So we're finishing the uni degree, tick, getting the corporate job, tick, like we're doing, and then, getting married, tick, having kids, tick, doing these things that we see people around us doing, and the media sort of glorifies as like, this is what you quote unquote should be doing. And we start to kind of, look outside of ourselves for the things that are going to bring us happiness, and go, once I finally have that fancy car, then I'll be happy. When I finally lose 5 kilos, then I'll be happy. When I've got the house in the nice suburb and the husband and the kids, then I'll be happy. And if we're not ever taking that moment to stop and go, how do I feel? What does my beautiful big life look like to me, whether it's ticking those boxes or for a lot of people it's not. And every time we tick one of these boxes that should bring us happiness, it leads to a feeling of more emptiness, and we're further away from that well-being because we're not listening to ourselves, and we're living this life that should be making us feel great, but it's not. So it creates this greater disconnection. So the importance of just feeling like we can show up as our best self, that's why we've got to look after our well-being.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you touched on this internal versus external, and I heard you say some of the things there which certainly resonate with me, and I'm sure do with a lot of other people as well, which is, if I just lose that 5 kilos, or if I just get that new job, or if I just earn another 10,000, then everything in my life will be fantastic. Yeah. It's such a common mindset for so many women out there, isn't it?
Oh, it's crazy how we all think like this, and I catch myself thinking like this. It's like we live in a world that wires us to think like this, so it's never something to beat yourself up about if you find you are sort of going, oh, I'll be happy when, because look at the world around you, and that's what most of the media you interact with is telling you, and everyone else has adopted these beliefs, so in a sense they're putting that on you. Maybe your parents would love to have child who they can brag about to their friends and say, look, they're ticking all these boxes, they're so successful, it's so great. And so you're doing it for them, or they're putting the pressure on you to do it without really anyone ever kind of sitting and going, but is this happiness? Is this what life really is meant to be about? Or is this kind of just looking in all the wrong places for something that we need to be looking within ourselves for?
And you're right, it's society, it's how we've evolved in that. Even when people talk about setting New Year's resolutions or setting your goals and your plans for this year, 5 years, 10 years, they're all quite superficial, really.
Yeah, yes. And as a coach, I do a lot of goal setting, but we're always tying it back into the feeling, because every time we set goals, we're saying, okay, say it's that I want to lose 5 kilos, but what do you think you'll feel when that's happened? That's what you're actually chasing. And if we're not making sure that the goal lines up with the feeling, then you're going to get there and go, oh, I thought I would feel better when I finally got here, but you don't. So making sure, that we're so aware that, okay, there's a feeling behind these goals and these ideas we have for our life. And the beauty in that is that we can start creating that feeling now, and we can do meditations that make us feel that way, or we can do little practices in our day, or we can just bring that into our mindset more, that that's how we would like to feel. And we don't have to wait until these external things happen to be able to actually feel really great in our life.
And am I understanding it right in that your well-being is really something that's almost in your own control? It's not something that is out of your control, which a lot of these other things in fact are?
Yeah, I think it's very different, and we're talking, breast cancer survivors, and when you have a serious illness pop up, it is out of your control, in a big extent. But there's also a lot that you can control, and a lot that you can still do to look after yourself. So, yeah, I think for your average person, it's very, very much in your control. And even if there's something big happening that's taking some of that control away from you, you can still exercise a lot of control over it, because it's your inner world that is the biggest contributor to your well-being. So if you're nurturing that and looking after that and staying aware and connected to that, then the well-being will flow more easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I'm really passionate about for the listeners of the podcast, the women that are breast cancer survivors or have had a breast cancer diagnosis, is that there is so much out of your control when you go through that. So actually almost everything is out of your control, but there are certain things that are still in your control, and things that you can do for yourself, I suppose, outside of the work that's being done for you by medicine or by medical professionals, and really looking after yourself and prioritizing your well-being, which is obviously today's topic, is something that they can do. And I'm really passionate about them focusing on that to really sort of, I suppose, help them through, help their mindset and their mind space, and I suppose improve that feeling, that sense of well-being amongst them within themselves.
Yes, because there is so much that you can do. And I think you can take a diagnosis like breast cancer and you can run with it in 2 very different directions. And you can run with it into victim mode. Why is this happening to me? Poor me. What's the point? I'll give up. Or what I think most people do is they go into that mode of like, all right, I'm strong, I can overcome this. And what has to happen then is that we turn the self-care up to maximum, and we go, all right, I'm saying no to the things in my life that I don't want to do, the people who are draining my energy, and I'm saying yes to having the time that I need, to not worrying about what it's meant to look like because this is what someone else on Instagram is doing, but really focusing on, all right, do I need to sleep in this morning instead of getting up to exercise? Does that feel like self-care, or is this a cop-out? And am I letting myself self-sabotage even though I would like to do it? So it's very much about connecting with those voices inside you. And when I talk about those voices, I mean, we've got this inner critic that loves to sabotage us and that's the voice that, is putting us into victim mode and going, there's nothing we can do, we're helpless, this is all horrible, and we just poor me. Or we've got this intuitive voice, and that voice of love that has that real inner strength, and it has that inner stillness, and it has that wisdom and that knowing of this is what we should be doing and this is what's going to make us feel great. So if we're doing the things that make us feel good, we're more connected with that intuitive voice that can then help us to choose more things that make us feel good.
Yeah, I love that. There was a comment there just a while back that you said about when something significant happens in your life, like a breast cancer diagnosis, it's not time to sort of turn the self-help dial down, but turn it right up. And I think, certainly for a lot of women, myself included, when you do have a diagnosis like that, the first thing you think is, oh gosh, I'll just let everybody else do everything for me and let everything, take its course. But in fact, it's so important, as you said, to turn that self-care dial right up and really make that a focus.
Yeah, yes, 100%. And it's all about that empowering and even feeling like you're being proactive about anything in your life will make you feel 100% better, rather than if you're surrendering and going, oh, well, there's nothing I can do. I guess this is me then. I'll just sit at home and wallow in it. Then there's no good feelings to be gained from that. Whereas if you're going, okay, there's not much I can do, but I can start meditating every morning and I can try and enjoy these little moments, and, I can start buying my favorite expensive brand of tea or whatever it is, and start nurturing yourself in that way and creating moments of your day that allow you to connect with that voice of kindness that you have, and also just stop and just be in the moment and be present and sort of appreciate all of these amazing little moments that we have that we're so used to just rushing through and glossing over, and we don't feel like we have a life that's very special because we're not paying attention to how special our life is, not because we need more fancy things or a different life.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, prioritising your wellbeing, obviously, it is very important. In your experience and with, the people that you've worked with, tell me what you see in terms of your clients that do this very well. What happens when they do it? And then also on the flip side of that, what do you see in people that don't prioritise their wellbeing?
I think I love to see the change when I have a client who comes to me who's very kind of green when it comes to all of the personal development stuff, and they don't know a lot about it. And it's these very simple things like it's okay to take time for yourself, and it's okay to feel whatever you feel, and you don't have to fight your emotions. You can be with them, and you're meant to feel the full spectrum. That's what being a human is like. You're not meant to feel happy all the time, and stepping out of comparison and that kind of thing. So, and moving into that self-care and that looking after your well-being, you just see this like calmness that they had inside of them come to the surface, and you see them start to get to know themselves in a way that means that they can create these beautiful boundaries in their life around, okay, this person doesn't do anything great for me, or I need to say no to things a couple of weeknights a week so that I can stay home and have a bath, or stay home and go to bed early, or paying attention to their cycle and saying, oh, this time of the month I'm feeling really great and outgoing, but this time I'm not. And it's that awareness that we get from starting to pay attention to our own well-being and our own feelings, as opposed to what a healthy lifestyle is that somebody else is shoving down our throat, or, that we're seeing on pop up on social media or whatever. And really trusting ourselves enough to make those decisions for ourselves, and asking ourselves what we need instead of trying to control everything so that we feel good. It's letting it come from within. And, when you wake up to eat breakfast, instead of going, oh, I should have the green smoothie because that's the diet I'm meant to be on at the moment, going, what do I need? What does my body need? And making a choice from that place. I see these clients just, they have this beautiful calmness and this beautiful trust in themselves. I think that's almost the biggest thing that I see, that they can just believe that they will make the right decisions, and they don't have to control, and they don't have to be strict, and they don't have to beat themselves up about it anymore. They can just trust themselves to make great decisions, because that's always when I'm working with someone, my aim is to put myself out of a job. I want them to be able to trust themselves enough to make these decisions on their own. And it's such an incredible transformation to see them sort of go, okay, so I don't necessarily have to do what everyone else is doing, but I can look after myself in a way that feels right to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, it's such a, I suppose none of this is rocket science, is it? But it's really about learning what you need to do, and working with people like yourself or others who can help in that process to really make it happen for you, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's such a powerful thing, because sadly that kind of inner knowing is quite neglected while we go through school, and generally it's not something that is a big part of our culture. So we are very focused on, like, is it logical? Is it rational? Who's doing it? What's this like? And it's all kind of this hard and fast thing. But just because, say, being on a paleo diet works for Pete Evans, it doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. And I think that's something else. You see these people who have found these things that work for them, and they're so passionate about it that they've forgotten that disclaimer that, great, yes, this is my thing and I've found it and we're all so happy for you, but this doesn't mean it's for everyone. And that is going to be so individual, and often what feels good to us doesn't fit in any of these boxes and doesn't fit under a nice, neat label. So we have to be open to kind of flowing with that and trusting ourselves to make those moment by moment decisions, rather than just sort of going, okay, this is the diet, better stick to it, and then not being able to do that and beating ourselves up and, going into this cycle where we're trying to do the right things, but it doesn't feel good to us, so we're not keeping it up.
Yeah, it's really sort of, I suppose, looking at that one size certainly doesn't fit all approach, and definitely not when we're talking about individual well-being.
No, absolutely.
And what about, I suppose, people who don't prioritise their well-being, who are in fact on the opposite end of the scale there? What sort of traits do you see in those types of people?
I just am I'm picturing people like that I know, and it's like this energy of, it's frantic and it's like scattered and there's no groundedness, there's no sureness, and there's like this frantically looking for validation everywhere you go, and trying to kind of keep your life so full of stuff that you never get to actually sit down and get in touch with what it is that you really need to have in your life. It's just like, no, I'll just keep overloading myself and I'll keep go and pushing through and hustling, and it's this very like forceful, and we all know people like that, and it's so exhausting to be around them. And like I definitely have a few people like that in my life, and I just want to like put my hands on their shoulders and be like, shh, like just just breathe, like you're amazing as you are. You don't have to keep on running on this hamster wheel trying to find something and not going anywhere. So I think that's what I see when you don't do it. And I see it in myself sometimes when I sort of get busy and you let the self-care stuff fall to the wayside, and I can feel this like franticness. And at least with the work I do, I'm very aware of it, and I sort of spot it, and I'm like, all right, you need a timeout. You've got to, like, nothing in your life is more important than this, and we can always press pause on things, because so much of the pressure we perceive, and I think when you meet these people who aren't necessarily looking after their well-being, they've got so much pressure on them, but it's all perceived, it's all in their mind, and we're like, the emails, the social media, the stuff, and it's like, you know what, if you stepped away from your inbox for a week and you put on your autoresponder and said, taking a break from emails, nothing would happen. Like the world, everything will go on just fine. So it's keeping that perspective that even though we feel like we have a lot of pressure and a lot of stress a lot of the time, it is just our perception of that. And when we can look at that and be aware of that and be really mindful, the pressure is perceived pressure, not real pressure, then it makes it a lot easier to step back from that and go, all right, maybe I don't need to put everything else before I put my well-being. Maybe I can press pause on those things, look after my well-being, and then, oh, hey, look, everything else actually got a whole lot easier to tackle now that I'm doing this.
Yeah, and that's obviously a really key message, is that everything else does get easier when you're in a good space yourself.
Yes, I know, and we've got that inner critic in our mind that's like, but just get up and like tackle the emails, when we've got this intuition going, sleep for an extra half an hour and then take the dog for a walk and take it easy, and guess what? You still get to 9:30 a.m. and that's when you finished your emails. But one, you were looking after yourself for an hour and a half, and the other one, you just went frantically dived into the inbox with that frantic energy, and then it becomes, you make mistakes and you can't focus, and you're not, oh God, it's just not a good space to be in. But it's very easy to get caught up with that voice that says, no, all of this other stuff is more important, because it's a much louder voice and it's a much more verbal voice, whereas our intuition is this little feeling that probably for most of our life we've gotten very used to sort of going, yeah, whatever, and just ignoring it.
Okay, well, moving on to some, I suppose, practical side of things when we're talking about looking at well-being, can you give us some examples, maybe some suggestions of what our listeners could do as a starting point if they wanted to really start to look at improving their own well-being.
Definitely. So the first one, like I've touched on several times, is having these moments of quiet in your day, having this moment of stillness. I can't rate meditation highly enough. I think we should all be doing it. I think the world would be a much different place if we were all meditating. Grab an app, hop on YouTube, find a meditation you like and do that every morning, or every evening as you fall asleep. Create that time. And then with that, another practice that I really love is journaling. So, when we're stressed and we're overwhelmed and we're busy, all of these worries that we have racing through our mind, they seem very big, they seem very overwhelming, but when there's something about putting it on paper that just takes the size out of it, and we can see really clearly, okay, this is going to go away then, and this is not actually something I need to worry about, or this is really not a big deal, or I can ask for help with this, and it gives us a chance to sort through things. So I think especially if you've got a breast cancer diagnosis, your journal is your best friend, and writing all of that stuff down, and getting these thoughts and this overwhelm out of your mind and onto some paper and working with it. And when you've got a couple of practices like that establish that connection to that inner knowing, then you can use that for everything else that you do. So when it comes to eating, instead of worrying too much about, because I think we know what healthy eating is. We all have a pretty general idea of that. And within that, there's so many different ways of doing it that are going to work for us or not work for us. So it's asking ourselves in those moments, and I think especially with exercise and movement, if we can try and do this every day, what does my body need at the moment? So if you're waking up and your energy's low, even though on paper it looks like a great idea to go and do a hard workout at the gym if you're trying to be healthy, for you on that day that doesn't work. That's not looking after your well-being. So it's having that movement time put aside, but then coming to the start of it and going, okay, what does my body need? Maybe you are feeling energetic, you're going to go for a run. Maybe energy's a bit lower, so a few yoga stretches or a walk around the block or something is what you need. So using that and having that as your guide for the choices you make around food and movement. Then also putting a time aside for your well-being, putting time aside for you to kind of recharge your batteries. I think it's something that we don't put in our diaries. We put in all the appointments and the workouts and the, catching up with people and parties and whatnot. It all goes in our diary. And then you kind of get to the end of the week and you're wondering why you're feeling stressed. Well, there was no time for you to recharge. There was no time for you to do the self-care stuff. So choosing some times that you can put it aside for you, whether it's, I try and do one weeknight I have at home, at least that's just my time. I have a bath or I go to bed really early and read my book or something like that. And then a chunk of time on the weekend as well. That is time that you don't have to worry about doing jobs. You don't have to do you can just come to that time and say, what do I need to make myself feel as good as I can at the moment? And maybe it is doing some jobs around the house. Maybe it's calling that friend and seeing if they want to catch up. Maybe it's having a nap or putting your feet up with a good book or something like that. So it's having that time set aside for it, I think, is really important, because sometimes we think, oh, it should just happen.
Yeah. And it doesn't.
No,
it never does if we just think that.
No, exactly, because life is just too full for that. So things get piled on top of it. So that's kind of a few suggestions of how we can make sure it's happening. But then I think also what we have to be really conscious of is if we're putting off looking after ourselves and why we're doing that. It's like, okay, no, this week is just so hectic. I'll look after my well-being next week. It's such a trap that we can go into, because then it gets to next week and of course that's just as busy, and then we don't look after our well-being. So it's noticing how we're putting it off and always responding to that with the question, well, what can I do now? How can I make this work for me? Like I was talking about when you're a mum before. It's, maybe it's instead of flicking through the 3 commercial radio stations in the car, it's choosing a relaxing CD or Spotify playlist and listening to that while you drive. Maybe it's taking a few deep breaths when you're in the shower and just using that as, 3 minutes of me time. Maybe it's making sure that your phone is out of your bedroom so that you don't jump into overstimulated scrolling mode as soon as you wake up, or you're not taking away from that nice connection time with your partner before you go to sleep. So there's so many little things we can do that don't even require more time or more energy. They just require us to have an intention to look after ourselves and make our life work for us as much as we possibly can, and nurture ourselves and be checking in and saying, okay, what do I need at the moment? And then moving forward from that place of this, my well-being has to be my priority, but it doesn't have to necessarily take tons of time or energy or hard work. It's just these little tweaks.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's some awesome suggestions in there. And I love that last sentence, which is, your well-being should be a priority, but it doesn't have to take hours every day. We just need to make it a focus of what we're doing. Yes,
and it's not actually that hard to do. It's just that we've got this little inner critic in our mind that's kind of working against us when we think, I would look after myself, but, when would I have time to go to yoga? We'll do something else then.
Yeah. And I loved, meditation. I know myself, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I made it my mission to learn to meditate, which is not easy. As we all know, the mind, wanders and goes at 100 miles an hour. But I'm like you, I can't speak highly enough of it, and the peace and centeredness it brings to you. And I know that sounds very airy-fairy, and I'm not a very airy-fairy person, but I'm all for the meditation side of things. I really, like you, I just think it's a godsend.
Yeah, definitely. It's a must.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, if there is just one thing our listeners can do today, so they've just listened to this podcast, they want to get off and say, okay, what am I going to do? What is the one thing that you would say to them that they should do today?
Oh, I just want to give them a million things to do.
Yeah.
The one thing is to go and sit down and figure out your stillness practice. So decide, do you want to journal? Would you like to meditate? Do you want to do both? Choose a time in your day that you're going to do it. Maybe it's, in the morning, in the evening, whenever. We think it's just going to happen because we're like, yeah, I'm going to meditate. But it's another decision that we have to make. And if we're not making that in advance, then sometimes, you get to the moment and you're like, oh, no, I'll do it in the evening. But so make a decision around the stillness practice that you're going to make, and then set up everything you can to make sure it happens. So if you want to meditate in your bedroom, then make sure there's a spot for that. In the lounge room, make sure there's a spot for that. Get a journal if you haven't got one. Choose a nice cushion, choose the meditation track that you're going to listen to, or some nice music that you'll listen to, or maybe find a studio or a teacher near you and find them and book in for a class there, or learn more about it. So make that a very conscious decision, choose that, and then take all of the hurdles out of your way.
I love that. So it's really plan to prioritize your well-being. Awesome. And I know you chucked a few little other ones in there into that one suggestion, but we'll take it as one.
Yeah.
Okay. So Amelia, if any of our listeners want to talk more with you about this, or want to do some work with you one-on-one, how can they connect with you?
So my website is ameliaharvey.com.au, and they can find all the info, contact details, all about coaching on there. I also have a Facebook group called Happy, Healthy, Inner Peace with Amelia Harvey, and that's where I interact a lot with my followers and that kind of thing, because I just found the email was getting a bit impersonal. So I do a lot of Facebook Live videos, like takeaways from my coaching sessions, and I share lots of things in there, so that I just feel like we're like a big group of friends who all kind of are on a little bit of a journey together in there, so that's a really nice place to come and join me as well.
Awesome. And I just realised I'm not even part of that Facebook group, so I really should get in there.
Yeah, come and join. You'll love it.
Yeah. All right. Well, Amelia, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. There has been so many great takeaways in our chat today that I'm sure our listeners will be able to implement. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to chat.
No problem. Thank you. And until we speak again soon. Thanks, Amelia.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Pink Movement podcast. For episode notes, links and downloads, head to thepinkmovement.com.au. Like what you're hearing? Join our Facebook page, subscribe through iTunes, and while you're there, provide a quick review. Want to help out? You can support the ongoing production of this podcast by becoming a patron. Find all the details on the website. The Pink Movement Podcast, helping you to stress less, move more, and feel better.